I'm so excited to introduce you to our guest, Dr. Jeremy Boden. I'm going to give you a little intro about Jeremy and then talk about a little bit what you can expect from this presentation. So first of all, Dr. Boden is an associate professor of family science at Utah Valley University. He teaches courses in marriage and family relationships, human sexuality, family dynamics, and couples therapy in the marriage and family therapy program. Dr. Boden is a licensed marriage and family therapist and also maintains a small private practice in Provo, Utah. He's also the owner and director of the Center for Marriage Preparation, which helps couples get ready for marriage through his Before We Say I Do program. His presentation today is titled Before We Say I Do, 7 Keys to Best Prepare for Marriage. You can be prepared to learn about some of the areas that are most important to focus on when preparing for marriage, as well as what skills need to be developed in order to best prepare your relationship for that new transition of marriage. This webinar is also helpful for parents of young single adults who are dating, or not the parents who are dating, but young single adults who are dating, who want to learn more about how they can help support their child and to best prepare for marriage. You're welcome to utilize the chat throughout to ask questions, and I will be keeping track of your questions, and we'll let Dr. Boden know what's going on in the chat so he can answer any confusion or talk about any thoughts that you might be having. But we'll also be doing the Q&A at the end for the final 15 minutes where you can enter your questions as well, and we'll have a more direct Q&A session during that portion. This workshop is approved for 1 continuing education credit, and you can request that certificate by filling out the survey that pops up at the end of this webinar. It's the last question on the survey where you just input some information and you'll get a certificate. Okay, that is everything. I'm going to turn the time over to you. Thanks so much for being here. I'm so excited to have you and to learn from you. I'm already married, but you can never learn enough about marriage preparation. And I know I'm going to be gleaning some things from you today.
Oh, good. Well, I hope so. Yeah, no, thank you so much. That was a great introduction. I appreciate that. And this, I think this is my second time doing this, and the second time doing one of these webinars. And so I really enjoy them. And so let me pull up the PowerPoint that I have, and then we will go from there. So as you said, my name is Dr. Boden, and I love teaching about relationships. One of the hardest parts about these types of presentations is that, I want to make sure that I'm sharing this. Is this being shared, Camilla?
No, I'm not seeing anything.
Okay. So let me share this.
There you go.
Okay. I thought for a second, that doesn't look like it's being shared. Okay.
Perfect.
So I love doing webinars. I've done several of them. I've done podcasts and things. One of the hardest parts about it is that because I teach at university, I teach a semester-long course and a lot of these topics. And so it's difficult for me to really condense down in 45 minutes all that we know. And so I've just kind of picked the most important parts and things that I've worked with couples, things that I've taught my students and things like that, and tried to condense it down. There's probably going to be a few questions here or there. Please, you can ask at any time, but we'll also have a Q&A at the end because I want to make sure that you get your questions answered. So let's jump just right into this. So why is it that premarital preparation is important? It's something I think about a lot, especially because I specialize in couples therapy. That's all I do. I don't work with individuals mostly. I just work with couples. And I find more often than not that if they would have done just a little bit of premarital preparation, they probably would have ameliorated some of the issues that they're dealing with at this time. And so I've come up with some things around what is it about premarital preparation that can be so helpful. One, it's a way to be intentional. Being intentional is really at the heart of a happy, healthy, and stable marriage. And one of the things I talk a lot about, it's kind of a theme that I bring up in working with couples, but also more specifically at the university when I'm talking about relationships. Being intentional is a major part. So couples who do some type of premarital preparation, we'll talk about this at the end a little bit more, but whether it is a premarital workshop or reading a premarital preparation book or going to some type of premarital education or premarital counseling where it's just the two of you, can be so, so helpful. And even when I've worked with couples, I've worked with a lot of couples doing premarital education and counseling in my office. And one of the most common things they say at the end is, I don't know how anybody gets married without going through this, because of how much they learned about each other, about themselves, and about the relationship. And for them, it's a very intentional way to start out the relationship. One of the things also is that you can address hidden or unaddressed issues. Many, many times when I'm working with couples, and by the way, a lot of couples that come into counseling, their relationship is going really well. They're not coming in because there was necessarily a problem. Some of them are, but many of them are just coming in because they want more skills and they want more education. And through the process and through the program that I've developed, they learn things about each other and they think, wow, I'm so glad that we addressed this before we got married. Another thing is that you can specifically learn communication and conflict resolution skills. One of the most important things, as you probably know, in a relationship, in a long-term romantic relationship, is some type of communication and conflict resolution skills. Because you are, I hate to break it to you, but you are going to have miscommunications. You are going to hurt each other's feelings. You are going to have breakdown in that communication. And so having some idea of a skill and being able to practice it a little bit before can pay great dividends. And a big thing is to discuss expectations around a variety of topics. In fact, I'll discuss some specifically that I call kind of the 10 crucial topics to discuss, and that will be one of our points. And then you can enter marriage with a framework and a greater confidence. That's the other thing is a lot of couples go into marriage very starry-eyed and everything's going to be great. But some don't. Some go in with a little bit of trepidation. And so this can be really helpful to say, okay, this is what marriage looks like. This is how it dissolves, and this is how it is strengthened and enriched. And so they go in with a lot of confidence. In fact, a lot of the students who I teach at the university, they feel so much more confident after the end of the semester, just having read a book around marriage and just getting some more learning around it. And they just feel more confident overall being in a long-term relationship. Okay, so here's the first key. One of them is to really discuss your expectations. You would be surprised how often I have couples, even married couples, who come in and say, I wish we would have talked about this before we got married. Okay, so here are the main things that I really emphasize with the couples that I work with. One is you're gonna talk about past or current mental health challenges, being very, very honest and open about that you are very explicit about, these are the things that I've struggled with. Now, can a marriage go on and be happy even if you struggle with some type of mental health challenge? Absolutely, 100%. But you have to address it, and there usually has to be some intentional actions to address it. Past trauma, this can be important to discuss any type of trauma, whether it was sexual trauma, violence in the family, any type of trauma that you've had would be important for you to discuss and bring up in your relationship. Any type of sexual history, anything that you have been involved in sexually, this is going to be really, really important to discuss and to be completely transparent around. Even if you're fearful that your partner might be a little disconcerted about some of that sexual history, you've got to bring it up. I'm noticing a little bit, Camilla, that there's some people in the chat. Are there any questions? I noticed are people just commenting?
No, I just had a question directed at me about a CEU, so we're still good to go.
Okay, perfect. Past romantic relationships or lack thereof, meaning what were some of the dynamics in your past relationships? Why did they end? What were some of the struggles that you had in those relationships, but patterns that were unhealthy, anything at all? A question that I will often have couples ask each other is, if your ex-partner was here, what would they say about why the relationship ended? That's an important thing to discuss. Also, if you've never been in a long-term romantic relationship, discussing that as well. What is it that happened? What is it? Why was it that you were never in? Not that there you should have been, but was there anything specific around that you were never in a long-term committed relationship? Any past or current struggles or addictions, whether that be gambling, substance abuse, maybe pornography, anything, video games, anything that may have been a struggle or reached the level of an addiction, should be completely open and honest about that. That needs to come to the table as you are preparing to make this lifelong commitment. What is your past or current financial situation? Okay, what is the debt? In fact, one of the things that we know, one of the top struggles for newlywed couples is debt brought into marriage, whether that's student loans or credit card or car loans, anything, any kind of personal loan. That's one of the top issues that newlywed couples reported in the research that they struggled with. And so being completely open. In fact, I do a whole entire session with premarital couples where we just talk about finances, and they come with a set of discussion questions that they've already gone through, and they go through a budget. They have to create a budget and discuss that. And then they talk about how money is symbolic for them, anything around that. Past criminal history. I know this may sound odd, but you should probably be pretty open around this, especially if you found out later on and you're trying to apply for a home and your partner has some type of criminal history that is you're getting declined because of a criminal history. Religious views and the level of commitment. Now, this is be unique for couples who do affiliate with a specific religion, but this is important if you do, to discuss what are your religious views on a variety of topics. What's your level of commitment? And this is important because a lot of couples will assume just because we are of the same faith, we then believe the same way and practice that religion the same way, which is often not the case. So being very transparent about your views and your level of commitment to that faith. And then future plans and expectations, as far as where do we see ourselves in 5 years? What's the career that you want? When do you want children? Do you not want children? When do you want to have children? So these you have to be open and honest in all of these. And then finally, the last question is there anything else that I should know about you before we either get engaged or before we continue this relationship or before we get married? Is there anything at all? I'm of the opinion that you should share everything before marriage, and obviously be transparent afterwards as well. But everything should be out on the table. That there shouldn't be any significant secrets that are brought into relationship. Obviously, you're going to be learning about things over time as you are married and continue your life together. You're going to learn little things, little nuances of their life. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about anything that may potentially impact the relationship in a negative way if they were to find out about it later on. Okay, so that's number one. So let's number two. I am a very big proponent of attachment theory. If you watch my webinar that I did several months ago, probably even a year ago, I think I was sick. So you'll have to excuse my voice in that webinar. But I am really big on attachment. So going into a marriage with a good understanding of what attachment is really, really important. So what I mean by that specifically, can I exit out of this poll? Because it won't let me advance.
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
So understand how people connect and disconnect is important to understand. and specifically within the attachment frame, in that we are all wired for connection. And what we all need at the end of the day is to feel safe, seen, and soothed consistently. And I could do a whole workshop just on those three things. But this idea that we feel emotionally safe with each other, that I can be open and honest with you, but also feel seen by you, that you understand me, that I feel special, that I feel cherished by you, and that also if I need it, that I can be soothed, calmed, taken care of, loved, embraced, things like that. And so again, when we understand that we are wired for this connection and that these are our core attachment needs, when these feel threatened, that's when we usually get into conflict. That's when we usually feel hurt or insecure. And so understanding that, it can reframe how you look at the relationship when problems or miscommunications or misunderstandings come about. That your partner is not trying to be controlling or mean. They're probably just feeling a bit insecure around feeling safe, seen, and soothed. And so when we experience a disconnection, we utilize what are called adaptive strategies to regain that disconnection. Okay? So when your partner is shutting down and pulling away, that is a way that they've learned how to protest that lack of attachment. When your partner is criticizing you or is defensive, that's one of the ways they've learned how to regain that lack of attachment. And so once you can start to really understand the role of attachment in a romantic relationship, it reframes problems in the relationship. That your partner they are doing these behaviors because of how much they care about you, because of how much they love you, and they're trying to regain that attachment. And finally, so those strategies can lead to negative patterns that are difficult to escape from, which is why we need to learn some communication skills, learn how to tune into each other's attachment needs. Okay, so that's number two. So number three is that there are, going now to this idea of communication and connection and repairing and resolving disconnections. Again, I could do a whole webinar just on this. I could probably do several just on communication. But it's really important for couples to come into the marriage, to enter marriage with a solid understanding of communication skills and how to repair and resolve disconnections. Okay. And so I've broken this up into kind of two areas of skills. One is the personal area where these are personal skills that you can learn how to emotionally regulate. I was just with a couple the other night, and that's one of their biggest issues that they're dealing with right now. They love each other, they care about each other, but in those moments where they get the message their partner they don't feel safe or seen, they immediately go into a reactive stance. And so one of the things that we're really working on is helping them how to emotionally regulate in those difficult moments, how to slow things down themselves, slow it down in themselves, be more mindful. And then also the second part of this is practicing what we call relational virtues. And what that essentially is that you're tuning into, I need to be kind. I need to be forgiving. I need to be understanding right now of my partner. I need to practice curiosity right now instead of trying to blame them. Okay, so those are the things you can do yourself. and then we can move on to, I've got to move this around. For some reason, it's not advancing. Oh, there we go. Then just the relational skills, basic things around listening, reflecting back what you heard. I often will do this with couples, and I'll say, like I said the other night with a couple, the other partner wanted to interrupt, and I said, whoa, slow down. Can you reflect back what they just shared? Because they just shared something really, really powerful with you. Can you help me understand or help them understand what you heard? What was the message that you got from that? And then validating their perspective. It's amazing what happens when couples validate each other. you can almost see this a softening in them when there is reflected back, when their partner says, you know what, now that you've said it that way, I can actually understand better. That makes a lot of sense to me. You can see the other partner just soften their stance. And then I had a couple of nights ago, well, this is a few weeks ago, but I remember this one particular partner was really kind of frustrated. And as soon as his wife validated his perspective, he immediately softened. And that's when he started taking responsibility for some of the issues that he had brought up, that he had been doing, the behaviors that he had been doing. And he said, you know, I'm really sorry. I came at you pretty strong and I didn't think about that. But it wasn't until she validated him. There's some, and so again, with couples, if they learn these skills premaritally, it can be huge for their success. Then showing understanding and empathy and more validation and compassion, listening for those feeling words such as sadness and hurt and loneliness, those types of things. And then obviously avoiding accusations and harsh startups. Okay, so let's jump to the fourth one. So the fourth one is maybe something you may not have thought of before, but this is that you should take a relationship strengths or assess your relationship strengths, challenges, and blind spots. One of the great things about the Marriage Commission is you can actually take the Relate survey for free. It costs $40 otherwise, but you can take it for free and assess your relationship. The other one is the SYMBIS, which stands for Saving Your Marriage Before It Starts. That one you have to take with an approved provider. It's usually a therapist or a clergy member, and they go through it with you. That's the one that I use. I use both of these, but the one I focus on a lot in my work with couples in our premarital program here at the center is the SYMBIS. And it goes through specifically all the strengths and challenges that they're potentially bringing into the relationship. And a part of this is what we bring up a lot in the SYMBIS is knowing their emotional sunbirds. These are those parts of the personally that they feel insecure about, that may be triggers or something for them. And it is such a huge relief to a lot of couples that I work with once they start to understand their own, and then they can articulate that to their partner, and their partner is usually so grateful for that. I didn't know that for you, when you are left alone, that is a huge trigger for you, or when somebody is critical of you, that you really tune into that and you shut down. I didn't know that about you. And this is really, really helpful. Those are what I call those emotional sunburns, because we all have gotten a sunburn at one point. And we tend to be, when we have a sunburn, we're just a little bit more sensitive to that. And we are hyper vigilant of anybody who's getting close to our sunburn. That's the way that these emotional sunburns work, is that we all have them, everyone, even the most healthiest of us, of the people that you might know, they probably have some insecurity in their life that when it's touched or gotten close to, they react to it. Okay, so these types of assessments can really highlight some of those emotional sunburns or some of these triggers for you, and they can stimulate a lot of discussion for you. So I strongly encourage, in fact, it's required for all couples that go through our program here to take either the Relate or the SYMBIS, or sometimes both. Okay, so number 4. This is, number 5. In my class that I teach at UVU is called Marriage and Relationship Skills. One of the first, it's the second thing. We go over relationship theories and the research, but then we jump right into this idea of bringing your best self to the marriage. And we spend a lot of time on this in my work here at the center. And specifically around this is the idea of discovering, kind of going back to what we talked about, discovering your strengths or areas that are challenging, and then putting in that consistent effort. So it's learning more about those raw spots, those emotional sunburns, and how you can bring your healthiest self. Nobody is going to be 100% healthy going into a marriage. We all have our struggles, our challenges, our insecurities, our emotional sunburns, our triggers. We all have those. But it's starting to work on these now as you are preparing for marriage, or if you're newlywed, to start working on them right now as well, to identify them and to start working on them. And so it's not about being perfectly emotionally and mentally healthy, but it's about owning your struggles. And then, as I was saying earlier, making intentional efforts to work on them. Now, I mentioned earlier a little bit about attachment. This is a book that I often will recommend to people. It's called Attachment Theory Workbook. It's by a marriage and family therapist named Annie Chen. And it's called the Attachment Theory Workbook. This is a really good book to go through to start working on some of that emotional and mental health, to start to learn your attachment styles, or what I called earlier, those attachment adaptation strategies. Okay. So next thing. So this is the number 6, and we are cruising through this. And so this will give us lots of time for a question and answer. So building and nurturing your commitment. I was just reading a study the other day. It was a really interesting study where they had a premarital program that they took couples through. And then several years later, they followed up with some of the couples who were now divorced, even though they had gone through a premarital program. And they asked them, what is the main thing that really hurt your relationship? And the number one thing was a felt sense of lack of commitment from their partner. I thought that was fascinating. That was the number one thing across the board that they attributed to the breakdown of their relationship. And so going into the marriage with a solid understanding of what commitment means to both of you. And I love this quote that I've quoted several times, that commitment is doing the thing you said you'd do when the mood you set it in has passed. Okay, so commitment is doing the thing you said you'd do when the mood you set it in has passed. And I love that. So you think about the wedding day. On the wedding day, if you were to ask somebody, what's your level of commitment? They'd be like, it's a 10, 100%. I'm totally in. I'm 100% committed to this. That's what commitment is. And when the difficulties come in, that you go back to that in the mood that you were on your wedding day, that's the level that it should be at. Okay. So really,
Dr.
a marriage
Boden?
can't survive. Oh, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I just saw in the chat, they're wondering if you can put the name of the workbook you mentioned in the chat, by Annie Chen, I believe. I can't remember.
Yes. Is that something you can? So it's called the Attachment Theory Workbook. I can
put it. I just needed to know what it was called.
Yeah. No, it's called the Attachment Theory Workbook by Annie Chen, Chen.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Okay, perfect.
And it's a workbook style, so it's not. I mean, there's obviously a lot of content, but there's ways to work through it. So, and I'm not getting any kickback from it, so don't think that I'm trying to publicize that. So a marriage can't survive if the idea of commitment is only felt and displayed on their wedding day. So going back to kind of that quote that I just said, one of the prominent researchers around commitment is Dr. Scott Stanley, and he's actually the author of one of the books that we use in my class. And he talks about 2 types of commitment. The first is called personal dedication, and those are the things that really you're just dedicated to this relationship. You care about the person and you are doing little things for them. You are sacrificing, you're helping them. All of these things are that personal dedication that keeps a relationship committed. The other type of commitment is what's called constraint commitment. And these are the things that are keeping the relationship together, regardless of what the couple does. For example, if you purchase a house together, that is something that is going to keep you, at least on some levels, in the marriage and committed. Okay? Because you think, wow, if we get out of this, we've got to go through all the process of selling the home and splitting it up. That's going to be problematic. Also, children, relationship history, any type of investment in the relationship that's going to constrain them, anything that is, if you were to get out of it, would be difficult to go through. That's going to be the constraint. Now, the good thing, these are both good things, because even couples that are doing really, really well, if they have a period in their relationship where they struggle, the constraint commitment is going to keep them together. But the couples that do the best are the ones who are focused on that personal dedication. And then maybe once in a while, there's some certain constraints that keep them kind of in the lane and keep them going forward. But it's the personal dedication that you want to focus on. And so with that, there are 4 dynamics that Dr. Scott Stanley outlines as far as personal dedication that premarital couples and newlywed couples, and really any couple, can focus on here. The first one is that you making your partner and your marriage your first priority. So going into the marriage, that should be the mindset for you, that you say, hey, our marriage and you are my number one priority. Obviously, there's going to be moments when that priority is going to shift, when you've got a major paper due, or you've got a work assignment, or a child gets sick. That's going to take precedence for a season. But you go back to, hey, at the end of the day, you are the most important priority in my life. Then the next is nurturing your couple identity. And that goes back to this idea of you are nurturing the we part of us, that teamwork, the partnership, that we have this couple identity, that we've merged each other, not completely, that you don't have your own identity, but that we are doing lots of things together. We have a partnership together. In fact, there's some research that shows that the more couples use that language of we and us is predictive of their overall commitment and marital satisfaction. But if they're using things like I or my house, my, anytime they're using that kind of pronoun of my, then if they're using that a lot instead of us or we, that's actually can be predictive. Okay. Sacrifice joyfully for your partner. The research is pretty clear around that, is that couples that do the best have partners that are within them that sacrifice from a place of joy. Now, not everything you do is going to be joyful if you have to sacrifice, but there's a consistency around that sacrifice, and that's part of commitment. That if you are sacrificing and you dedicate your partner to that thing, hey, I'm going to sacrifice things. Yeah, I wanted to go hang out with my friends this weekend, but my partner has something that they want me to be at, and sorry, I've got to forego that. And I think that's a difficult thing for a lot of people. I think especially newlywed couples, is a lot of times they're, and I'm not suggesting that your friendships should go by the way, but they are going to change. The amount of time that you spend with friends is probably going to decrease, especially if you decide to bring children into the relationship. Your priorities are going to shift. And then finally, having this long-term view that no matter what, we are going to stick this out. Now, I'm not talking about excusing destructive behavior or abusive behavior. That's not what I'm talking about. But if we both have this idea that, hey, we have a long-term view, it's more likely that I'm going to be able to sacrifice, because I know that this is going to be something that's going to help my partner, help our relationship. So having that long-term view has been found to be really, really helpful. Okay, finally, last one, number 7. So this is where a big thing that I do with couples when they come into our office around for premarital preparation, but also I was working recently with a newlywed couple and they loved this activity. So it's creating a vision for your marriage. Okay? So here's some quotes around vision. A vision is not just a picture of what could be, it's an appeal to our better selves, a call to become something more. A vision for your life allows you to live out of hope rather than out of your fears. And then finally, where there is no vision, you've probably heard this quote before, where there is no vision, the people perish. Okay. So one of the things that we do here is we have them start to really create a marriage vision. And what that looks like is, first, you set aside some time. Set aside some specific time that you can start to talk about, what do we want our marriage to look like? And again, this can be great for a newlywed couple or any couple at any stage. What do we want our marriage to look like? So we're going to set aside specific time to work on this. Then to have a vision brainstorm. Who you can talk about, and I actually have them do this separately, and then they come together. You can do it however you want, but I actually have them fill out this separately, and then they come together, and then they come to the session where they talk about this. So they talk about who are some examples that we want to emulate. Maybe parents or aunts and uncles or siblings or friends or anybody that we want to emulate their relationship. And then to talk about what is it specifically about their relationship that we want to emulate, okay? Then what are some basic core principles that we want to live by in our relationship, okay? Do we want to live by a principle of teamwork? That whatever it is, we're going to approach this as a team, whether it's finances, whether it's sex, whether it's parenting, we're going to be a team. These are those intentional behaviors that I was talking about earlier, okay? And another great way to discuss this is, what do we want our marriage to look like in 1 year? 1 year from now, what do we want to be doing? Or what do you think we'll be doing? What is your expectation? What about 5 years from now? Where might we be living? Where are we going to be progressing in our professions, in our schooling, in our careers as parents or whatever? Then 10 and 25 years, what are we looking at ahead? This can stimulate a lot of really good discussion. And I'll tell you, a lot of the couples don't do, they would never have thought to do this. Okay. But once they do, they talk about how helpful it was in their relationship as they started to discuss these things and really learn more about each other. Okay, so that's the second step, have a vision brainstorm. And then discuss and rewrite your vision. Okay, so you're discussing it, putting these things together, and then you start to write them down. Okay, so you write this down, and then number 4 is to do something intentional around whether it is premarital education or counseling, some type of premarital workshop, or a premarital book. Some of them that I suggest is the Fighting for Your Marriage book. It's a great one by Dr. Scott Stanley, Howard Markman, Scott Stanley, and I can't remember her first name, but it's Bloomberg is her last name. It's a fantastic book for marriage preparation. Another one that I like is this one is called The Things I Wish I'd Known Before We Got Married by Gary Chapman. And if some of you, that name may sound familiar, he's the one that wrote The 5 Love Languages. This is a really good book as well. It's a short one, it's not very long. Things I Wish I'd Known Before We Got Married. This is a great one to read. The book that the Symbis is based off of, this one is called Saving Your Marriage Before It Starts. This is a great book to go through that can really be helpful. And then finally, this one is a little bit more workbooky. It's a little bit longer, but it's fantastic. It's called I Do, a marriage workbook for engaged couples. This is a great one. Any of these are going to be helpful for newlywed couples as well. Any of these are going to be helpful. I would say of all of those, probably the Fighting for Your Marriage is going to be the most helpful for a newlywed couple. That's going to be the most helpful for them. But there's premarital workshops that you can go to as well. There was one I just found out about, and I wanted to see if I could bring it up here. And I know that there are some that BYU does that are premarital, and as far as I know, they're free. And then there's the ones that we do. We don't do workshops, but we do individualized the program. It's flexible, but it's usually about a 7 to 8 session program before they marry, and then 1 session after, about 6 months after the wedding. But we've also taken newlywed couples through the program as well, and they have found it really helpful. So it's a program that I've developed over the last couple of years, and now I'm training therapists to use it and to have couples come in. And again, these are the types of couples that at the end they think, man, I don't know how anybody gets married without this. And we include a lot of homework with discussion questions, worksheets, readings, and things like that. So it's very involved, but it can be extremely helpful. So then after you go through either a book or a workshop, you go back to your vision and then you revise that marriage vision. Okay, now that we've learned all of this, how do we want to revise this? What do we want our relationship to look like? Okay, so that's going to be a big part of this as well. So those are the seven keys to best prepare for marriage. And I ended a few minutes early, so I'm happy to take questions now if you would like. So I'm going to unshare this. So if there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
It looks like we have 2 questions in the Q&A right now.
Okay, I think I can click on those. Let's see. Let's see. What if things agreed on in a premarital counseling change? When to have kids and how to raise our kids? Yeah, that is a fantastic question, because you can't address all expectations. There's going to be some things that are going to either A, you didn't discuss, or B, they change. That's going to be part of the relationship. And this is what I would suggest, that you have a contingency plan. What do we do when this happens, when some of our expectations or things that we discussed do change? What is something that how can we approach those types of situations? Okay, that's what I would suggest, that you just say, okay, if it is something, let's go back to what I understood the expectation to be and what you understood the expectation to be, so that we are on the same page. We can't disagree with each other, because that's just what I heard. That's what I understood the expectation. And if it's something significant, and I mean, as far as, like, for example, if they said, oh, I absolutely 100% want to have children, and then you get married and they say no, that is problematic, and it may lead you to probably seek out some marital counseling, because that's a pretty significant one, especially around kids. And that's the one that, when to have them. That's something that you'll just have to start to negotiate with each other and say, okay, we've got to compromise. We've got to come to some type of compromise, because this is the expectation I had, and this is what you had. So these issues are going to come up. What's helpful is to discuss some type of contingency plan. How are we going to address this in a compassionate way? And there's going to be some compromise. So hopefully that was helpful. What extra steps, if any, would you suggest for a couple where one partner is from the US and the other partner is from another country? Fantastic question. This, again, is where you're going to have a little bit more unique experience, is that you are going to have to spend a lot of time, because I'm assuming a little bit is probably around culture if they're from outside of the US, because there's going to be different expectations around relationships, around how money is viewed, sex is viewed, family, parenting, kids, all of that. So this is where you're going to have to be extra intentional in learning about their family, learning about their culture, and getting all of those expectations out on the table. Again, you're not going to be able to address all of them. You're going to miss a few here and there, but if you're hitting the most important ones, that's going to pay huge dividends for you. So having a very transparent conversation around these cultural, maybe similarities, but also cultural differences, expectations around all the different topics that we've discussed. So that is one of the things that is really, and then I would say, obviously, doing reading a book together, going to some type of premarital workshop, premarital education workshop, or some type of premarital education or counseling. We've told our kids that they can't get married until they're going to pay for their whole wedding unless they do at least about 7 or 8 sessions of premarital counseling. Obviously not with me, but we're basically requiring them to do that. And so I suggest all couples do some type of premarital education, whether it's a workshop or reading a book or doing that. And that is going to be really, really helpful for a couple where one partner is from outside of the US. Okay, next question. Any additional recommendations for a second marriage? Yes, in fact, well, I would say for a second marriage, that's absolutely, I would highly recommend a workshop. I would even go past the book. Books can be helpful. There's a book called The Remarriage Checkup, which is a really, really good book that I've given, that I've had couples who are going through a remarriage. That is a really, really helpful book. It's called The Remarriage Checkup by David Olson, Dr. David Olson. And somebody said, Camille, my sound went out. Hopefully that's okay. But I would absolutely, beyond a book, I would also do a marriage workshop, or I would do some type of counseling just to get everything else on the table. Remarriages are hard. They're really, really difficult. And so you want to go in best prepared. Even if you think everything is wonderful, there's likely going to be problems, especially if neither of you are bringing kids into the relationship. There's going to be less problems. But if one or both of you are bringing children in and it's going to be a step family, there's going to be some struggle. Okay. Even if it's not at the beginning, there eventually will be. And so having some education around how step families work, how remarriage works, and going to a couples therapist is going to be really, really helpful to start to prepare for that. Okay. The next one, how do you talk about things like sexual history and past relationships when these subjects make you uncomfortable? Yeah, it's such a great question. It is. That's a tough one because sex is such a private thing and it can be very vulnerable and a little scary. One of the things is if it is something significant, whether there was maybe abuse or some type of assault, you may want to do that with a therapist, with somebody who understands trauma and can help your partner understand the complexities that sometimes can come with trauma, especially around sexual trauma. Or if it's just something that, for example, that maybe you were sexually active earlier in your life and your partner doesn't know that, that's just something that it is your responsibility, and it's really their right to know your sexual history, especially if you're going to be getting married. Now, this isn't something you would discuss on a first, second, or fifth date. It's when you can see the relationship progressing in a way that it feels like it's going to be committed. So some of this is you just have to make sure your partner's going to be safe, that if you share something with them, that they're going to be safe, that they're not going to be critical of you. And so you may want to test out the waters a little bit before you share that with them, because it's a very personal thing and it can be difficult. But you may also want to share it with them if you feel like it's extra private, extra personal, with a therapist there. Good question. What are resources and tools in marriage prep would you refer your clients to utilize regarding boundaries with families and in-laws? Oh, such a great question. Yeah, we could do a whole workshop just on that. That is a tough one. This is where, again, I really emphasize the idea that your marriage comes first. You have to have each other's back. I had a premarital couple many years ago where that was their biggest thing, and it actually eventually led to them getting a divorce after they got married. Unfortunately, they didn't bring up some of the issues completely in the premarital process. That's a long story I won't get into, but there was definitely some boundary crossing. One of my favorite books is called Boundaries, and it's actually by Cloud, the last name Cloud. I wish I had a copy of it here, but it's called Boundaries. It's a fantastic book. Anything by Brene Brown around boundaries can be really, really helpful for both partners to understand the importance of boundaries. Families, there has to be this boundary that your relationship comes before. You are now exiting your family system. And so you have to be careful that you're not going to your family and complaining about your partner. Absolutely don't do that. Now, if they're being abusive, that's different. But going to your family, siblings, parents, and complaining about your partner, do not do that. That can create a lot of problems. Or if your in-laws or your parents are being intrusive, there has to be an explicit conversation around that you are now married, and this is my partner, and this is my spouse, and this is who I am loyal to. And you start from there. Also, this is a good message for parents. You've got to give them space to grow. If you are intrusive in their relationship, that's going to cause a lot of problems. So big thing is just being very explicit. I have that conversation with all premarital couples. How supportive are your parents? Do they understand boundaries in this? And even having a conversation with parents beforehand, saying, hey, we want to get out in the open. What is acceptable as far as boundaries here? Good question. Okay, how many of the 7 keys should be completed before engagement? I would say all of them. Now, again, some of them can be done after. For example, the marriage vision can be probably done in the first year, and some of the other things. But you want to make sure you're getting out specifically the expectations one. Number 2, around the attachment, that can be learned kind of afterwards, but it's really, really good to know before going in, because you may have problems in the first year of marriage. Some couples do. They really, really struggle. And so it'd be helpful to have that. But the absolutely 100% number 1 around the expectations, and then learning really communication skills is going to be really vital, because if you don't have those, you can create some ruptures. Sometimes they're called attachment injuries early in the relationship that are difficult to repair from. But if you know going in with some really good skills, that can be helpful. Like I said, the marriage vision, that can be something completed in the first year or 2. The SYMBIS or the RELATE or some type of marriage assessment or relationship assessment, that can be done. But gosh, again, if you can do that beforehand to really get a lot of these conversations started, you can avoid some potential problems. So that's a great question. I hadn't thought about that, Andrew. What is the name of your center? So it's called the Center for Marriage Preparation. The website is Center for Marriage Prep. And I have 2 therapists that I've hired that I'm training in this. It's in Provo, but we can do online. It's most beneficial in person. And it's usually, like I said, it's an 8-session process with 1 session after the marriage to kind of do a check-in. But we've done it before where they've only done 3 or 4 sessions just because they got started a little bit late. And I recommend that couples start this around as soon as they get engaged, or if right as they're leading up, meaning they know they're getting married, they know they're going to get engaged, start as soon as you know, and start early. So again, the website is centerformarriageprep.com. If you live outside of Utah, what programs or workshops would you recommend for premarital education? There are some really good ones. Prep is a fantastic one. They even have an online one that you can do. And I don't know how much it is. I think in Utah it's free, but I could be, you could correct me on that. But there are probably some local, but there are some online ones. Prep is the one that I know more specifically. That's an online one. It's something, if we're doing just premarital education, it's something that we can do online, and it's just educational. And so it's more like relationship coaching. That's something that we can do just online. What workshops would you suggest for remarriage? That is a fantastic question, Rachel. I don't know of any that are specifically to remarriage as far as workshops go. So that's something that's a little bit of my homework that I should probably start looking into. I don't know that. I'm sure that there are some out there, but I don't know any off the top of my head. That's a great question. How can a couple...
Can I interrupt for just a second?
Yeah, of course.
In the chat, we had someone post that there's a Smart Steps for Step Families course.
Yes, that's
HRU.
Okay, Smart Steps.
The link was posted in the chat if anyone's interested.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. That was a great one. And by the way, going back to our center, you can also follow us at Center for Marriage Prep on Instagram. That's another place you can follow us, and we post quotes and different things coming up. So can we get a copy of your slides? Yeah, I'm happy to share those, and I can send those to Camilla, and she can send those out or post those wherever. I'm happy to do that. Can I add my question from earlier? How do I talk about sensitive topics like sexual trauma and past relationships if hearing about it is, oh, okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood that. Yeah, that's I would be really interested in what is it about it. Obviously, you can't comment on this, but what is it about it that makes you uncomfortable? That's something that probably should be addressed. What is the hardest part for you? What's your biggest fear? Understanding what is your biggest fear about hearing some of this? What's the hardest part? Is it, I know for some people, it's like, I feel uncomfortable hearing about my partner's sexual past. That's really hard for me. That is understandable. It's really, really hard to hear about the person that you love being intimate with somebody else. That makes complete sense. I think a lot of people would share that fear, that uncomfortableness. What I would start to want to unpack around that is, what is the hardest part of that? What is your biggest fear in that? And then express that to your partner. This is really hard for me to hear because this is my fear. Or this is what I'm most sensitive about. And if it gets to the point where you cannot absolutely, and I don't want to give the impression that therapy is the answer to anything, but if it gets to the level where you just cannot hear it at all, I would recommend going to therapy and start to unpack with a therapist, a licensed clinical mental health therapist. What is it about this that's so hard? Because it's important that you're able to talk about these things. And then also, is that uncomfortableness going to transition into your marriage when you talk about your sexual relationship? Because that's going to be problematic as well. So I think it's a really good exercise to start talking about sex and your expectations, because that's going to transition into your marriage, that you're able to feel comfortable. Again, I could do a whole workshop just on communicating around sexuality in a committed romantic relationship. But that's going to be a great way to do it. So I hope, Jillian, that answered your question. Such a fantastic question, and I'm glad you asked that. That would be kind of my response to that. So I'm not seeing any other questions. I'm happy to answer more. It looks like we have a few more minutes, but some people asked, do I accept insurance? Yes, certain insurances right now, we're just starting out. So right now it's not, but our sessions are really affordable. They're $80 a session, which is really, really good. And but we're trying to get paneled through some insurances, but right now it's just private pay. So I'm seeing some in chat. So let's see if I can see some of these. Anxiouslyengaged.byu.edu. That's the one. So thank you for whoever posted that. Healthy Relationships Utah offers free class for singles who are prepared. That's how to avoid falling in love with jerk. I love that curriculum. That's fantastic curriculum. And so, yeah, I think that's it. Is there anything else that I can, Camilla, that I can be helpful with, or anything else?
I see one last question in the Q&A that just popped up, and then I think we can do that one if you're all right.
Yeah. I can't see. Oh, somebody said our marriage is still ending 50% of the time. That's a good question. On average right now, it's actually lower. It's around 40 to 45%. And one of the reasons is people just aren't getting married. And so people are cohabitating more now than ever before. And so if you're cohabitating, it's really hard to get divorced. So that's one of the reasons that people are just scared. They're scared of marriage. What we're finding is there's more apprehensive around it. So it may sound like good news that the divorce rate is going down, but it's actually really just steady right now. And then it's kind of dipped a little bit down to 45 to 40. But really the big reason is because people just aren't getting married. So it's not necessarily that marriages are necessarily getting much better. So good question though. Was that the one, Camilla, that you were referring to?
There's actually another one, but I think,
shoot.
Yeah,
okay.
No, we're good. We still have a little bit of time. So the last question is, how can a couple transition to sexual intimacy? And I'm assuming the context around this question is like, if they're in a relation or getting married and have not had this be had sexual intimacy be a part of their relationship prior, how do they move from not being sexually intimate to being sexually intimate, and how do they prepare? I'm assuming that's the context around the question.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So, well, with 1 minute left, that's actually my area of research. That's what I study. And so again, I could do a whole workshop just on that, just based on the results. Just a quick answer is being very open about expectations around that. Start to educate yourself around sexuality and sexual response, sexual arousal. There's a great book called Real Intimacy. It's geared a little bit more towards religious couples, so I'll say that. That's one that can be really, really helpful. It's called Real Intimacy by Kristen Hodson, I want to say. That's a really good place to start. Being open and honest about your sexual past, sexual expectations, learning about sexuality, reading a book, make sure that you have a solid friendship going in, and then learning how to communicate about sexuality. That's my quick one. I literally just did a workshop at the LDS Institute last week or 2 weeks ago around this topic, because it is what I research. But it's a fantastic question. I may even have an article. I can even send that to you too, Camilla, that I've written up about some of our research. So I can send that to you as well.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much. This was so awesome. And
yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
Great questions. Holy cow.
Q&A was great.
Those were great questions. Awesome.
They always are great questions. We've got such a great audience every single time. So I'll answer some quick questions about the recording and the resources that were mentioned throughout the webinar. So I'll be sending out a recording of this webinar to everyone who registered. So everyone who's here via email tomorrow, you'll get the link straight there. There's no registration required, but the link will also be posted to our archived webinars page on our website, where you can go back anytime and re-register to watch, but you'll get a direct link tomorrow. And then also I can send the slides in that email as well, and the links to the resources that were mentioned. So everyone will get a whole bunch of stuff tomorrow in their inbox. Just one email, but you've got links for days. So yeah, I think that's everything. And thank you so much. You did such a great job. And
oh, thank you.
I loved your responses for the Q&A, and presentation was wonderful. I loved the first slide you had about like expectations and like conversation topics while you're engaged before you're married. Like so smart. Anyway, well, I think we've got to go. So I'll let y'all go. And we hope to see you again, Dr. Boden. We've already had you once. This is Dr. Boden's second time here, if any of you knew that. If you want to watch one of his previous webinars, you can go to our archive webinars page as well. And I hope to see you again, Dr. Boden.
Yes, definitely. It was a lot of fun. Happy to do it.
Okay. See ya.
Okay.